few months ago, Nate asked me, put me on the calendar to preach this message. Then the scheduling conflict hit. We had to flip-flop it. I was supposed to do it last week. We did it this week. And on Friday, I walked out of a place in Memphis to find that my car was no longer parked where I left it. You might call them friends. I would call them strangers. Decided they wanted the car that I used to have. And now I'm going to teach a message today called How and When to Forgive. And so if you wonder if we practice what we preach up here, we try our best. And when we don't try our best, God tries our best for us. And so I forgive those two knuckleheads, wherever they may be. I need them to lay low for 10 days so State Farm doesn't care. And then that would be wildly helpful to me at this particular moment. And I forgive Nate for asking me to teach this message on how and when to forgive. I forgive Pastor Jonathan for creating this series that held a message about forgiveness, right? Just before author Bob Goff's daughter was born, he wrote a note and it said this to his daughter. He said, "Dear Lindsay, I forgive you for wrecking my car." And he buried that letter in a pickle jar. 18 years later, she wrecked his car. He gave her the coordinates to where he buried the pickle jar. She found the jar with the note inside, and she couldn't believe it. She went to her dad and she said, "Dad, you forgave me before I was even born." You see, Bob Goff knew that his daughter was going to make big mistakes. So before she was even born, he started with a heart of forgiveness. And if we're going to be able to function well in this world and follow Jesus at all, we're going to have to be those that start each day with a heart of forgiveness. You see, the reason that Bob Goff knew his daughter was going to make big mistakes is because he knew that she was going to be born and would live broken. Why? Because he knew that he was broken. And so am I. And so are you. In 2 Corinthians 4, verses 7 through 9, you don't have to turn there, just listen closely. This is what Paul wrote. He said, "But we have this treasure," speaking of Christ, the Holy Spirit, "in jars of clay, to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. We are persecuted, but not forsaken. We are struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our bodies." You see, Paul paints the picture that we, on our own, as humans, we're jars of clay. We're fragile. We're frail. We're easily broken. And in every one of us, we're going to experience all sorts of difficulties, but it's Christ in us, in these jars of clay, that manifests itself as life. So you and every person that you meet is fragile, frail, and easily broken. And you and every person you meet has been dropped a lot. Those of us that are in Christ, we've got cracked places. We've got pieces missing. And we've been super glued together in some places. But we have Christ in us that brings life to our broken and cracked jars. Now, to complicate matters, there are many people that we meet that are just as cracked and have just as many missing pieces, but they don't have Christ in them to bring life to the broken jars. And each and every day, every one of us, we are interacting and cohabitating with one another. And if we don't understand this, if we don't start with this reality, then we're going to struggle mightily. We're going to bump into each other. We just are. Accept it. And when we do, our fragile side shows. We're going to crack one another. We're going to chip one another. And if the life inside of us is not greater then the frailty on the outside of us, then our brokenness is really going to shine through. Now I want to tell you something. I want you to hear me. I promise you, you ready? People are not waking up in the morning thinking about how to hurt you, okay? People are not thinking, I bet if I do this, it's really going to offend them today, and I can't wait to see them and do it. If I'm honest with you, there's very few people in this world that you're at the top of their minds. Can we just be honest? So I'm not thinking about you, but I can't wait to see Austin today. This is really going to offend him. I'm going to get him good. And then they do. I'm like, I knew you were coming. I knew you were thinking about this all night, weren't you? Ain't how this goes. If by some chance there is, I'm going to address it. If there's somebody that's just thinking about you and how to hurt you all the time, we're going to deal with it. But I promise you, it's rare. So if you find yourself constantly or consistently offended or with your feelings hurt, it says more about the life that's inside of you than the cracks that are outside of you. Again, Paul said that you and I will be afflicted in every way, but that the life of Christ should still be prominent in and through us. We've got to get that foundation before we can deal with the rest of this. Because we're going to go through some major things, and we're going to go through some big circumstances in life that we've got to work through toward forgiveness. But many people spend so much time on the goofy stuff, on just the daily bumps of broken people living on a broken planet together, that when the major things come, they don't have the energy or the strength left to deal with it. And once that begins to set in, it's easy to give up. It's easy to become bitter. And we don't want that. So with that said, let's dive in. If you have your Bibles, Matthew chapter 18. Matthew chapter 18 down in verse 15. Matthew 18 verse 15. Notice what it says. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault, between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. And if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and tax collector. Truly, I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Again, I say to you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them to my Father in heaven, by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am among them. If you're taking notes, the first thing I want you to understand is this. I want you to understand the boundaries. Understand the boundaries. Now, boundaries are not a bad thing. God is a God of boundaries. When he created the ocean, he created a boundary to keep the ocean where the ocean is and the land where the land is. There are boundaries in our relationship with him. Jesus told us that no one comes to the Father except through him. That is a boundary. Boundaries protect us, but boundaries also give us a space to function within them. And so when we understand the boundaries, we know how to function within relationships. So the first aspect of the boundary I want you to understand is I want you to understand the process. Understand the process. Here in verses 15 through 17, Jesus outlines what we do when there's an issue between us and someone else. It's a process. And he says the first thing that you are to do is you go to that person and you tell them what they did to hurt you. You don't go tell everybody. You don't post passive-aggressive things on social media. You don't give them the silent treatment and just assume that they know what they did. You go to them, you say, hey, listen, whether you meant to or not, here's something that happened. We got to deal with it. Because it hurt. It hurt. You just tell them. And the hope is that through that conversation, you come to an understanding together. As Jesus says here, you gain a brother or a sister. What he's saying is this, is you restore the relationship. Whatever was broken, whatever was sideways is now right ways. Now, this section as a whole is dealing with church discipline amongst brothers and sisters. Verses 16 and 17 apply very specifically to that, and I want our focus to remain on our individual relationships, but I do briefly want to hit on these two verses. You see, verse 16, it tells us that if a person won't listen within the context of the church, we take one or two people with us to, again, talk through the issues. If that doesn't work, you take them before the church. If that doesn't work, that person is removed from the fellowship of that church. That may seem harsh, but I've seen many times the actions of one or two spread throughout and harm a church greatly. So if that bothers you, that this is in Scripture, and it seems very true, the easy answer is this. You ready? Don't be a knucklehead. All right? Don't do dumb stuff. Don't be a knucklehead. We won't have any issues. All right? Now, with that said, two things I want you to carry with you for your individual relationships is this. The first step, again, is you always go to the person directly. How can you forgive them if they don't know what needs to be forgiven? Do not assume that they just know. Again, things happen all the time, and you are not at the top of everybody's mind. I love you to pieces and back together again. It just is what it is. You have to understand that. We go to them directly. But after that, sometimes we need outside help and outside perspective to help navigate difficulties within relationships, whether it be a counselor or a pastor or someone just to walk through it together to help get all sides to get this relationship back together. Again, we often need that outside perspective. And the last thing is this, is sometimes there definitely comes a time for a relationship to change or to even end. You see, the context here in verse 17 is when they refuse to listen, meaning that person has no desire to try. They reject growing in the relationship, and they just don't care. This is sometimes manifests itself in this way. That's just the way that I am. Listen, can I be honest with you? Jesus didn't come to die to leave you just the way that you are. As followers of Jesus, that should be a phrase we remove from our vocabulary. And if you do say that, you're probably a knucklehead. We've already established, don't be a knucklehead. We don't get to stay the way that we are. He says, if they refuse to listen, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing you can do. And so there is this kind of thought sometimes amongst even Christian circles that, well, we just have to stay in even abusive type situations, but that ain't here. Boundaries are real. Boundaries are real. And so we have to be those who understand there does come a point in time where relationships have to change and real boundaries have to be put in place in those relationships, and there's nothing wrong with that. If that person refuses to listen, refuses to grow, and refuses to acknowledge reality. It just is what it is. And sometimes the person that has to build the boundaries made to feel guilty, or even struggles with feeling guilty for putting such boundaries in place. And the thing that you and I always have to understand is if a boundary has to be put in place with somebody, I didn't choose that, they did. They did. Anything else is just silly. Now, this is not some license to get out of a relationship free card, okay? It's the understanding that if someone is just unwilling to care, to listen, to take their actions into account, there's just not much you can do. You put a boundary in place, hoping that one day that boundary can be shifted and ultimately removed. But that's on them. The second aspect of this boundaries is this. We have to understand the pursuit. Understand the pursuit. So what's the purpose of the process? What's the pursuit of this restoration? And the pursuit is this. We are to pursue truth. What's true? In verse 18, it says, what is loosed and bound in heaven. What it's speaking of is understanding, is God in agreement with what's happening? Is God in agreement? Have you pursued truth? What does God say about this particular situation? And where does he land on it? I told you that in relationships with others, it's clunky and bumpy and messy, and emotions and feelings get involved. But the thing that we have to pursue is what is true. My emotions will lie to me. Again, what do our emotions say? They meant to do it. They woke up this morning thinking about how they're going to be able to do this. They know exactly what they did, yada, yada. That's what our emotions tell us. Our emotions will lie to us. What is true? You got to hold your emotions loosely and understand if my emotions are lying to me, I'm willing to not listen to it, and I'll trade it for what's true. What's true? What really happened? Again, it's rarely malicious. But if we are not careful, we will allow the bumps that come with being jars of clay that bump into each other to cause us to define that person by their brokenness. And that becomes the lens by which we view them. So anything that happens from that point forward is now defined by this. But what we've got to understand and ask is, where did the breakdown occur? You see, not only are we jars of clay, but we're also jars of clay that are in different shapes and sizes. We look different. We are different. We don't hold water the same way. Sometimes the breakdown is that you're a jar that holds water one way, and they're a jar that holds water another way. And we just need to understand that. I remember my wife and Lindsay, there was a particular personality test. I don't use the name of it because people got opinions about all kinds of stuff, right? Everybody's got opinions, all right? So you have to just guess what it is. I'm not going to tell you. But this particular one really helped us come to an understanding of this. You ready? We're different, right? Like we say these things. We're like, what is it? Men are from Venus or something? Ladies are from, I can't remember. One of us is from Venus. One of us is from Mars. I don't know which one. We say these things. We're just different. People are different. But when we are in relationships, we don't understand it. Like we forget it. You see, those differences come into, I can say something and I think, man, I just communicated that perfectly. And she's like, I heard nothing. And I'm like, well, this ain't going well. And then be the other way. She's like, I told you this 87 times. I was like, I don't remember even. Are you sure? Like, this is a thing, you know? The words we say that we think we're communicating really well, we think we're doing something, our actions, the way they're portrayed by other people, we think in our minds that it looks one way, but to that person, if we don't understand how they read, how they communicate, it may look a different way. So in our close relationships, one of my best pieces of advice, and I'm a grower in this, is you better learn how to speak their language and them you. I'm going to save you a lot of trouble. But the second thing is this. In relationships, we don't have time. We're not that close to get to know everybody's book. It's not going to happen. There are going to be a lot of bumps. And you're going to say something, you're going to do something, or you're going to portray something that's said or done to you. In your mind, you're going to think, this is what they mean, this is what they did, this is how they said it. And the reality is, more times than not, I'm telling you, the vast majority of the time, you're just reading different languages. You're just missing each other. So we got to understand, we communicate different and we see things different. So this is very simple. It's like, I heard you say this. This is how it felt when it came across. And when that person is like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I didn't even mean that at all. Believe them, because it's probably true. And you're the same way. You communicate different ways. Our goal is to figure out what's true, what really happened. Not what do I feel. What's true? And if what is true is that you're in the wrong, then let's deal with that. Don't be afraid of that. We make mistakes. If what is true is that we just missed each other, then let's deal with that. Because when verse 18 talks about what is loosed and bound in heaven, it's saying, does God agree with your stance or not? And so if you go to war for this one thing that's in your mind, God is looking at that. He's saying, no, this ain't it. That is not it. You're going the wrong direction on this one. And we'll run through those stop signs real fast and we get ourselves in a little mess. If he agrees with you, if you can say, this is where I believe that God lands on this, you're pursuing truth. If it's not, then you got to go back on the path to find out what's true. But the second aspect of this is unity. There's truth and there's unity. And verses 19 and 20 deal with this. And every breakdown The ultimate pursuit is restoration, unity, reconciliation. In the context of verse 18, where it talks about loosed or bound in heaven, again, it's saying, is God in agreement with where you've landed? And then here in verses 19 and 20, it's saying that once we have worked to define what is true and that God is in agreement with this, then God absolutely can and will work, and restoration is possible. Restoration is the goal. We'll deal with when it's not possible before we get done today. Restoration is the goal. Truth is where it's found. What's true? The second thing I want you to notice today is this. I want you to notice our tension. Notice our tension. Look at verses 21 and 22. So Jesus has been the one talking. Right on the heels of this, Peter speaks up, as he often does. It says this: Then Peter came up and said to Jesus, Lord, how often will my brothers sin against me and I forgive them? As many as 7 times? And Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times. Underneath this tension, well, one of the things we have to understand is, what is our default? What is our default? And so right there in verse 21, Peter gives us insight. Jesus has just talked about all this stuff, forgiving your brothers and sisters, forgiving people. And Peter speaks up with the question, Jesus, I need to make sure I'm real clear on this. How many times must we forgive someone that sins against us? 7 times? And I'm going to give you a little inside baseball here. Peter thought he was killing it with this response. Because in their mind, 7 was way over and beyond. He's like, 7 times? I'm going to do 7 times because I'm really good. Our default is just tell me how far I got to go till I get to wash my hands. So I can write in my little book, look at me, I did 7 times. I did what I'm supposed to. I don't have to do anything else. We got to understand our heart is where it takes us. Our heart takes us to the path of least resistance. Our heart takes us to the path of get me out of whatever I don't like. That's where you go. That's where Peter went. What does Jesus tell him? What we have to understand is our default was, let me get out of this. The second thing you got to understand is this: what's God's call? What's God's call? And so when Jesus responds to Peter, he says, no, Peter, not 7 times, 70 times 7. What you have to understand is this is innumerable. What he's saying is as many times as it takes. As many times as it takes. He says you always start a place of forgiveness. Now we've already dealt with boundaries, right? We understand it's not meaning that like anybody can just abusive relationships or just things, harmful relationships. There's boundaries. But even within boundaries, there's forgiveness. Even within those boundaries, there's hope to remove the boundaries for restoration. That's the hope. But understand that as far as just forgiving, as many times as it takes, we forgive. Every single time. And you say, Austin, how in the world are we supposed to do that? I'm glad you asked, because Jesus responds here. The third thing I want you to understand is this, is we forgive out of the forgiveness that we've received. We forgive out of the forgiveness that we've received. Look at verse 23. So after Jesus answers Peter, he tells a story. Right there in verse 23. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servant. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave the debt. 10,000 talents was an incomprehensible amount. The people that were listening to this, their mind would have been blown. 10,000 talents. But this tells us what out of pity, he was forgiven. He didn't earn it. He received it. What we have to understand is that in Christ, we have been forgiven of an incomprehensible amount. And we've got to wake up every day with that understanding. We've got to consistently remind ourselves of the forgiveness that we have received. We forget quickly. We have amnesia. We forget all that we've received. And one of the other things that we often don't do is we don't grow in a consistent knowledge of how much we've truly been forgiven of. You see, when you come to know Jesus, we know very little, if we're honest, about what we've been forgiven of. It's as we walk with Jesus and we grow in that knowledge and understanding through his word, the more we study it, we come to this conclusion like, holy cow, this too, and this too. And as life goes on, we do dumb things, and that too. He forgives us, he forgives us, he forgives us, he forgives us. And we've got to remember it. That's why we got to get out of this mindset of let me just get a little verse to get me through the day and flip it to I need to know more of who Jesus is so that I understand the depth of the relationship that I have with him. And the more we understand the depth of the relationship we have with him, the more we understand the forgiveness that we've received. You don't forgive by gritting your teeth. You forgive by drawing from the well of forgiveness you've been given. We look at what they've done to us. We say, yeah, it hurts. It's real. We've got to deal with it. I'm not saying we're just like, oh, well, everything is not happy-go-lucky. It's not, this is real. This hurts. But I'm going to forgive, and I'm going to pursue forgiveness and restoration. Why? Because of what I've received and the restoration I've received. We forgive out of what we've forgiven. So listen, the silly things, the goofy stuff, it makes us look really silly. We're like, I just can't get past that thing they said to me that day. And God's like, really? That? Do you remember this? Got to remember, we forgive out of forgiveness we've received. There's serious things, there's boundaries, but even forgiveness is within those things. The fourth and last thing I want you to understand today is this, is that we condemn out of the forgiveness that we've forgotten. We condemn out of the forgiveness we've forgotten. Look at verse 28. But when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. And seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, pay what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, have patience with me and I will pay you. And he refused and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him and said to him, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? And in anger his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. 100 denarii is a fraction of 10,000 talents. So this servant who's just been released from an incomprehensible, unpayable amount finds this called his fellow servant. We might call it his brother or his sister. We might call it his wife or his husband, his best friend, his children, his parents. He finds them right on the heels of being released from unpayable amount and says, that 100 denarii you owe me, you pay it right now. And he says, I can't do it. He has him thrown in jail. And the master finds out. He said, how in the world could you do that to him after what I just forgave you? And he threw him in jail, cost him everything. We've got to understand that when you find yourself with a condemning heart, when you find yourself with a vengeful heart, when you find yourself flying off the handle, when you find yourself holding things over other people's heads, when you find yourself holding a grudge, when you find yourself holding on to anger, there needs to be this rumble strip in your life that when you begin to feel and think those things, it triggers in your mind that you likely, at least in that moment, have forgotten the forgiveness that you yourself have received. And it's time to take a breath, and it's time to remember and reestablish the heart of forgiveness that was placed in you when you met Christ. Again, we're broken. We're jacked up. Even you, okay? You think, I got it together. Well, I think we know the truth, right? Your laundry's piled up just like the rest of us, all right? We got to remember, when we look at our brothers and sisters, we have this heart that cries out for them, right? It's my broken brothers and sisters. It's my broken brothers and sisters. And what we often do is we say, well, I would never do what they did to me. That may be true. You would just do something different. You see, we often define people by the weaknesses that they have that we don't have. But what we have to understand is every one of us in this room have our own weaknesses and our own struggles. And those own seemingly consistent places where we think, I just can't get this right. I just keep messing this up. There's one dumb spot. It's a weakness. It's a crack. It's a chip. And again, when you don't understand that you got your own, we begin to hold that one over their head. Because in our minds, I would never do that. We got to remind ourselves, I may never do that. I just do something different. And so we remember the forgiveness that we need. We remember the forgiveness that we've received. C.S. Lewis said that forgiveness is a lovely idea until we have to give it. It's true. We look at our own situations, and when we make mistakes, we think, I'm sorry, I'm doing my best. When someone else makes a mistake, we think, how could they? Give them the same grace you need to give yourself. And so there's three things I want you to understand as we wrap up here today. Small things are small things, and we got to keep perspective. There's a quote I was reminded of recently. It's one of my favorite quotes by a guy named John Maxwell. That's what he said. He said, you cannot overestimate the unimportance of practically everything. The reality is this, most stuff, it ain't that big a deal. My car was stolen on Friday. I couldn't wait to eat lunch. I was like, as soon as the cop came, I was like, well, Lindsay had to come pick me up because I didn't have a car. And I was like, I'm going to eat lunch. This is State Farm's problem, not mine. Small things are small things, y'all. Let them be small things. And when small things become big things in your life, it's not that they're magically big. It's that you got a perspective problem. And you got a remembering problem. And so you got to go back to that place of forgiveness and remember. Let small things be small things. Whatever you're holding on to, you got to deal with it. Somebody hurt your feelings, just go tell them. They probably didn't even know they did it. If they did, they didn't mean it, most likely. Just go tell them. If they say they're sorry, believe them. Move on. It's too much stuff, too much bumping, too many of us. The second thing is this, is there are big things, all right? There are big stuff that happens. Every one of us probably in this room got some big stuff that's happened to us at the hands of somebody else. Doesn't mean that relationship has to go back to the way it was. It doesn't mean that you have to function without boundaries, but you still have to work toward forgiveness. And forgiveness doesn't mean that things have to go back the way they are. That's up to the other person in many ways. Why is that important? Receiving forgiveness from God is the greatest gift that we're ever going to receive. But I'm convinced that being given the grace to forgive other people, that may be the second greatest gift we've ever been given. You know why? Because it sets us free from the actions of others ever getting the last word in our lives. What an incredible gift that He's given to us. So if you got some big stuff that you've never dealt with, you got to deal with it. It ain't going anywhere. That may mean you need to find a counselor. We'll help you. It may mean you come sit down and be like, I need to talk through some stuff. I promise you, there ain't much you're going to tell us that we ain't heard before. But I'm here to be shocked. And if you do, we'll walk through that sucker together too. You need help. It's okay. It's okay. But if you leave it there, it's going to cause a whole bunch of problems. And so if you got big stuff, we got to deal with it. You got to figure out what the boundaries are. What's that look like? And how do you function within it? And the third thing I want you to understand is there's someone in this room that's never actually received this forgiveness. Your jar of clay, just like the rest of us, lumpy and bumpy and cracked. But that life that shines through the cracks and the brokenness, you don't have it. It begins with a question. It takes a little bit of courage to ask it. It says, what must I do to have that life in me? What do I do to receive that forgiveness that you guys are telling me I can receive? And my life can be lived different. And so maybe you know somebody in this room today that you trust because you know them and you came with them. Ask them, like, what do I do? And he'd be like, I ain't quite sure. Then walk, find Nate or me or Josh, even while he's playing, he don't care. You know, like, what do I do? What do I do with this? Or come find one of us at the front. Like, what do I do? I want that life. I want that forgiveness. I want life to be lived different. What must I do to be saved? It'll be the joy of our hearts, joy of our lives to get to tell you.